So our relationship to fashion really comes from the fact that it didn't matter what your socioeconomic status was. You, as a Black person, were representing the race at all times, and you must step out with a sense of pride about yourself.
Welcome to the Art Show. I'm Almighty Ahmadi, sitting here with Afatasi, the artist, welder, textile artist, fashion designer, gallery owner, genealogist, historian. You know, there's just a
few hats.
Yeah, so many hats. All right, so where to start? So can you just tell the people who don't know you just about yourself just a little bit?
Sure. My name is Afatasi, the artist. I'm born, raised, based in San Francisco. I am deeply concerned about the continued population decline of generational Black San Franciscans, those of us who are specifically descendants of both the Great Migration and United States chattel slavery. It's a very specific group of people, and we are the only group that has been in decline on every United States census in San Francisco since the 1950s. So this is an over 50-year, going on 60-year decline, and I didn't coin this term, but what we are experiencing is a government-sanctioned ethno-genocide in our own city.
Yeah, that's okay.
And my entire art practice is to not just affirm this community, but to also give. My goodness, there's so many cultural contributions that I feel are being erased, and so a lot of what I do is a resistance against this erasure. And particularly, I believe in genealogy as a human right for those of us who are descendant of chattel slavery. And I also believe that human rights begins at home.
Yeah. Okay. So that just ties me in. We're really on third.
Yes.
So,
the train, the teacher.
What was it like for you to navigate San Francisco as a young Black woman who's an artist trying to find her voice?
I really would say growing up in San Francisco, it took me a very long time to consider myself an artist,
Mm-hmm.
and I realized that everything that I did, as an adult, it didn't matter what field of work I found myself in. I was always bringing a creative element to it. So for a long time, I was, during college, to support myself, I was in hospitality. I was a bartender and a server for over a decade, and that was how I supported myself, and I was always just doing a lot of creative work in that. And I ended up working at a school, and I was there for like 12 years, and I was doing a lot of creative work there. I was an arts educator specifically, and I was always just, adding creativity to my job fields. And once I left working for the school district, I decided to pursue my art career full-time. And I thought that it would be different, working for yourself. It was going to be, or even in the arts field, would be different, and it wasn't.
It's not.
It wasn't, as it was, there's particularly, in San Francisco, with the destruction of the Harlem of the West, there's less opportunities for us in the arts.
Yeah.
And I think that also San Francisco does a really piss poor job of not just cultivating its Black artists, holding space for them, and also creating a pipeline for us to stay here. I think that a lot of us have had to take our genius outside of San Francisco in order to survive, and I think that's wrong. I've gone to other countries, I've gone to other cities in the United States where the arts scene, I'm sure, you know, city and local governments could be doing better. However, it's quite robust. They have pipelines for the artists to have housing, or even or even just their own space so that they could realize and also give back. Like artists really, artists dictate the culture of really any place. And because we have a lack of black artists in San Francisco, and really it's not the lack, it's the lack of pipelines to really see yourself as an artist. So say I grew up in San Francisco, and you know, the arts, I wasn't encouraged to be an artist, and you know, I wasn't discouraged either. It just was not a lane or a career that you really, you know, would say aloud. It was a thing that you did on the side.
More like just a hustle. It's always
was
just
on the back burner. And then the second that you step towards that and say, actually, you know what, this is actually who I am. And you switch to the front burner, you know what I'm saying? And that is kind of where I'm at now.
So what was your focus getting into the art field? Was textiles one of the first things that you found yourself being an artist in, or was it something else?
Yes, so I'm originally a textile artist. I taught myself how to sew. I taught myself how to use a sewing machine in my 30s. So I didn't know how to sew like my whole life. I didn't have that story. I just had, you know, an affinity towards fabrics and textiles. I also, something to note, you know, my mother is Samoan, so my dad is, you know, American, and my mother is from another country. So we grew up having to get our traditional clothing made, and that was kind of like my entryway. Like that was, I think the fabric store was kind of the first time, like it was the only place that my mom would really just be like, okay, just, you know, just get out of my face and get whatever you want. You know what I'm saying? So those are just kind of the ways that I remember being introduced into textiles at a younger age. And just the trips to the fabric stores being these like creative freedoms that, you know, when your mom, you go to the store with your mom, she doesn't really let you get anything, don't touch anything, don't. And the fabric store was like one of those places, because my mom didn't really have a lot of patience. You know, she didn't. So when it came to like our traditional clothing, and you know, when we grew up, we would participate, or we would collaborate as a community on things like these luau's that we would do, and these luau's would have like different islander performances. You would do like the Tahitian, the, you know, Tongan, and the Samoan, and they all had very specific costume. They called for different specific things, and so we would be tasked, you know, my siblings and I, and you know, others in the community, the church community, would be tasked with being the ones that made these things, or even just like putting the outfits together.
So that's very important, because fashion is a part of the culture, but in this instance, your culture was your fashion. So how important do you think it is for like fashion to be like part of not only the community but just our culture in general? Like how important is fashion to you for the culture? You know,
fashion is very, like growing up in San Francisco, I grew up with a lot of people, you know, having individual personal styles that I appreciated. I think because I grew up a lot of times going to fabric stores and stuff like that, I think I had a different kind of knowledge base of like clothing, just because I knew like when you buy clothes from the store, like it starts off as a fabric, right? And or on a boat. So I had appreciation for design elements of like, you know, for example, like a pair of pants has like a really big pocket, like, oh, so I noticed details like that, and I'm like, oh, like if I ever learn to sew, like I'm gonna make myself a pair of pants with a big pocket, or like certain details like that. And also just fashion and culture go hand in hand. And you know, we come from a city where there was a time in the Harlem of the West where you really couldn't get into places unless you were dressed up. And I would say that
Like that suited and
even
booted.
deeper, as a community who are descendants from United States chattel slavery, we were always given the lesser, the scraps, and made things from that.
Yeah.
And so, one more thing that I will say about how fashion is ingrained in our culture, even here in San Francisco, is we come from a culture that even if you were poor, you still dressed up because it was a part of a representation of your family.
Yeah.
You know, you weren't. It was so. There is now. I feel the culture
Like
has
a sense of honor.
shifted. Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was. You were. You know, even if you didn't have a lot of money, you still. You know, you presented yourself in a way with some dignity and some pride, and that was a real thing, because a lot of our people came from places in the South where they didn't have a lot of money, and they were coming from this sharecropping background where money was very few and far between, and it didn't matter that didn't matter. You still dressed up whenever you presented yourself to the world, and I feel like in urban culture, that has been villainized.
Yeah.
That has been villainized, like us wanting to dress nice, or us wanting to there's this always phrase of saying like, oh, stop buying Jordans, or like, start saving and stop buying Jordans.
Yeah.
And I don't subscribe to those. Those are stereotypes, and they're anti-Black at their core, because I mean, let's be honest, it's not our fault that we come from a good-looking people.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I just keep saying. It's just really not our fault.
Yeah.
And that we're stylish in the fact that we had to really, turn shit to shine. We weren't even allowed into department stores until really the 1970s.
Yeah.
So our relationship to fashion it really comes from the fact that it didn't matter what your socioeconomic status was. You, as a Black person, were representing the race at all times, and you must step out with a sense of pride about yourself. And that has unfortunately been villainized and switched. So people have this misconception again of like us being so-called poor, but buying a lot of, or spending a lot of money on our clothes, when that was, it was part of our culture to just look nice.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we actually don't spend a lot of money on our clothes. We just are able to put them together really nicely. So that's the misconception that, a lot of my work just kind of wants to dispel. Like, also just, leave us alone, really. Like,
yeah. So,
it's not our fault. Like,
you've been, for those who don't know, you've been putting on a fashion show for the past
4 years.
4 years.
Next year.
Yeah,
next
4
year will be
years.
4 years. Yeah.
Afrofuturism.
Yes.
Right? Why Afrofuturism? And just like what makes Afrofuturism the baseline or theme of just the show, or just in general, like just to enlighten, like what makes that kind of thing?
I am interested in futurism just because I'm a huge sci-fi fan.
Yeah, me too.
Just in general,
Yeah.
like I grew up on Star Trek: The Next Generation. Just because that was like one of the things that was like on TV, like growing up all the time. And so I'm a huge like sci-fi fan. That's first and foremost. Two, I actually really wanted to be an astronaut growing up, and I was always into I was always into space. I was always into like, oh my gosh, like space is the next frontier. And I actually don't like flying, so I don't know how that's gonna work. But I did want to be an astronaut growing up. And just a love of sci-fi. And when I became when I started pursuing my textile career, full-time in the arts, the common theme that I saw like play out in my life was this almost disappearance of our community. Like the disappearance of that. I was like, wow, it's like really like sci-fi.
Yeah, that's true, because I believe Fillmore went from 11% to 3% just from the 90s, just from when I was you know, just
Right.
that's
And I
past
saw the
30 years.
tail end of that.
Yeah.
I saw the tail end of that. So my dad was an educator, and he would go out of his way to support these businesses. So he would drive. I grew up in, so I was born in Fillmore. I grew up in Lakeview, and I now am a longtime Bayview resident. And my father used to drive us all the way from Lakeview to 3rd Street to frequent the businesses and to Fillmore, and showed us how to support Black businesses with your dollar. Like, you really should be going out of your way. That was really the messaging that I received growing up. And so growing up, you know, when I was younger, I saw these businesses, and then it was almost like once I got into high school or I graduated from high school, they were no longer there. And so I really, during the pandemic, really, that was when I transitioned into my arts career. That was also during a lot of this so-called racial reckoning of the country, and really remembering friends and family and people that we knew who are no longer here. And really the pandemic giving you the time to really like reflect and pause on that, particularly because race and the racial tensions in our country were heightened because of, you know, what happened to George Floyd. So it really allowed me the pandemic, to do more research
into kind of this disappearance of our community here. And I was like, wow, this was completely driven by policy. The disappearance of our people was orchestrated illegally by this city. And I don't think that that's right.
And not only do I not think, I know these people. Like I remember, you know, running into people randomly, right? As an adult, you run into people and then recalling that, and recalling all the times that I ran into people that I went to like middle school with or high school with, and they were in the city for they were like, oh, I'm in Vallejo now, I'm in Pittsburgh, I'm in Antioch now, and a lot of that. And then being like, actually, like it would have been really nice if they still had that house, or if they still were there, and really just being like, I don't think I know anyone from my high school, like when I graduated from high school, like anybody from that graduating class, I don't think any of them actually have homes here in San Francisco. Like we have not been able to purchase a home. And that all happened, and then the more you do the research, the more you see how this was a real concerted effort over the course of time to remove our people. This is removal, this is, and not only that, this is like dispersal. So not only do we not, so one thing that the destruction of the Harlem of the West did was it not just illegally removed people, but it also led the way for our political disenfranchisement in the city. So like, you get what I'm saying? So like, it wasn't just removal, it was also dispersal. So like, not only are we politically disenfranchised in terms of like, we can't vote for our own interests right now because we just simply don't have the numbers. And then not only do we not have those powers, but have political power here in numbers, we also don't have any political power really anywhere because we're dispersed. So even there is no one city that we have been removed to that has political power. So even the folks who are, I call them exiled from San Francisco, they don't have like major political, power in any one Bay Area city.
That's very true.
So that has led for our removal really anywhere because we can't vote in the laws that could protect us.
And so one of the ways that I was really just deeply thinking about how we can protect ourselves is through policy, and policy that specifically targets us. And with that comes work in identity. Do you get what I'm saying? Because here's
we need
the
the
thing.
identity in order to push.
You need the you need in
collective
order
identity.
to push the policy, but also here's the thing: the harmful policies, the redlining, the urban removal, or the urban renewal, which was removal. Those were policies that targeted us specifically.
Yeah.
As a group. And so now what I am saying with my arts practice and really within that, there must be policy that repairs our group. So if our group is targeted, there must be targeted repair. And that is what reparations is. It is targeted repair to remediate the harms of powerful, race-based, harmful, legislation that really decimated our community. And that is like the bulk of my research has been really looking at the ways that the city, partnered with multiple agencies over the course of decades to remove us from the city, all while creating a PR campaign that San Francisco is liberal and progressive.
Oh yeah.
When it is anything but. It is a sanctuary city for not us. It is not a sanctuary city for us, and that needs to be called out. It does.
Yeah.
I'm here to do that and say, I'm not okay with that. I'm not okay with that. And it's always when the victims are people that we receive no justice.
Yeah.
When we're the victims, it's okay for that kind of behavior and those types of policies to happen. And we're still, it's not even just a one and done. It's not like they passed these policies and then that was it. We are still living in the effects of policies that were passed in the 60s to harm us.
That's
so it's not, until we receive repair, we will still continue to be harmed. And the less numbers we have, the easier it is to pick us off. Because we are very small in numbers now. And so those are just the things that I speak about in my arts practice, and and I don't feel there's any alarm bells being rung when it comes to us.
And if we were any other group, there would be. If we were any other group where the numbers were declining, there would be resources pumped into that community. There would be housing initiatives. There would be all sorts of, policies being passed to help.
Yeah. So that kind of leads me to one of my next questions is, what do you think an artist's job is in the community?
Absolutely. So the sister Nina Simone said our job as artists is to reflect the times.
Yeah, it's the stay time. Stay timeless.
I said it, that's all. I mean, these are. See, sometimes the scholarship is already out there.
Yeah.
Sister Nina Simone said, your job as an artist is to reflect the times. And I am reflecting the times of a shrinking demographic. I am saying, hey, no one is really talking about, and I will say what has happened to us in San Francisco is actually happening to it's happening in all major cities, but particularly the northern and western cities that were the final destinations of the Great Migration. That this removal of our people, so places like Chicago, Detroit, New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Oakland, that's happening to all those cities, what's happening to us. We have been decimated early on, so I say that our community was, removed early on, but it absolutely set the precedent. And I mean, other communities across the country, this has happened to as well. But our community early on, that happened too. And we're still feeling the effects today. There has been no redress for any of these harms. And really, I feel the expectation is for us to just roll over and die out. That is the expectation, for us to not say shit, to be like, oh, okay, well, this is happening. Oh, okay, well, great. Like, and I say, hell no.
I do believe the fashion show is really good work. And then the genealogy, we spoke about that a little bit. That's huge work. Because I believe that, just tracing your line back is powerful, knowing who your people was. So can you just talk to me a little bit about how you do that, what's the process, and
maybe how I got started.
yeah, just how did you even get, like, what was the first thing that got you?
Yeah, so
So
during the pandemic, I was doing a lot of just really sitting with our condition in San Francisco, and I got introduced. I got invited to like a clubhouse, so like I had to download the app or something. I was like, oh, okay, guys. So during the pandemic, there was like a lot of people that I knew that were on Clubhouse, and so I was asked to join Clubhouse, and I did, and I somehow ended up finding myself in a lot of spaces that were just discussing reparations. And while I was working, meaning like when I would sew, do my sewing and things like that, I was just listening to people's opinions about, I don't even know how, it would be other things, but they would end up going into reparations. So they could be talking about George Floyd. There was a lot of that going on, and then it ended up going into reparations. And so one of the consistent things that I heard about the reparations, about reparations was about your lineage, about who was eligible, the eligibility for reparations.
Yeah.
That was a huge thing, and that perked my ear because again, I'm mixed race.
Yeah, because it's like,
walking
in
I'm mixed
brown.
race. It's
like,
not right.
Yeah.
Right, and so a lot of the things that I heard in regards to reparations in these spaces was tracing your lineage so that you were eligible, and trying to see if your peoples were, like, one thing to know in genealogy, and I'll talk about it later, is that the 1870 census is a significant census. In the 1870, because that was the very first census where formerly enslaved people were listed by name. Yes, so 1865 was our emancipation.
Wow.
I call it free-ish. Free-ish.
Yeah.
So free-ish happened in 1865. I kind of broadly, there were still enslaved people, don't get me wrong, all the way up until 1970.
So we got our liberty.
There was, right, and so we were free-ish in 1865, so I just think, Juneteenth. And then after, so, then it's 1870, and that census was where our peoples were listed on the census form by name.
Okay.
Before then, we were not. We were property, and were either tally marks, or checks, or just, they would list the enslaver with the ages and sex of the enslaver.
So how does that tie into last name? Like 1870, census, everybody's free-ish.
Yeah.
What are we putting as our last names, and how important is that for us to be tracked down?
So some people changed their names and had every right to do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's a few things. So after 1865, the emancipation of our people. So this is what I'm saying. Like America, I think the schools, particularly San Francisco Unified School District, does a really piss poor job again of really understanding the robustness of Reconstruction, of what happened right after the Civil War.
Yeah, they kind of just blow by it.
They just blow by it, and that is such a waste to really not teach all students about this time period in American history. It was quite significant. Our people, for the first time, took agency of their own lives. Yeah. And one of the ways that they did it was changing their last name. So we were so after emancipation, we were classified as contraband of war, right? So we're contraband. You know what contraband is? It's just, for those of you who don't know, contraband is the spoils of war. So if the army comes in, guns blazing, and the townspeople leave, and there is, a castle and it's filled with riches, gold coins and fine arts pieces, that's contraband.
Take what you want.
Yeah, that's contraband. So that is what our people were considered. We were considered refugees and contraband. Refugees and contraband. And what happened afterwards was people were, again, we weren't even considered citizens yet until the 14th Amendment, and that I believe was like in 1866 1966 was the 14th Amendment being passed. I could be wrong on that, so sorry. But we became citizens with the 14th Amendment. However, we were still second-class citizens. We were not given full liberties. And so the last names of our people largely still stayed with the enslaved. Some people just didn't know that they could. And so one thing that's also interesting to note is that on the 1870 census, a lot of our people were still living not far from where they were enslaved. We did not have freedom of movement.
My great granny grew up on the same cotton farm.
Yes.
Yes,
and my granny too.
Yeah,
my granny too.
She's
yeah.
like he was English or German or something like that, but it was like.
So so during Reconstruction, that was when you saw our people run for office. We had, out of Louisiana, they had a very robust, but it was a group of men who were formerly enslaved. They were Congress people. And they just went straight to the UN, the House of Representatives. They freed themselves, barely didn't learn to read, and were like, "Oh, I'm running for office," and they won.
Yeah, I was going to say this. This is one of those things. It's kind of funny. Where it's like, okay, we freed. They turn around like, "Oh, we're running for office." It's almost like y'all knew how to read this whole time. How you gonna run for office?
Yeah, well, they were very smart. Like
2 years later.
Like please don't ever underestimate the intelligence. Like that is what I want people to know, is that we weren't just this mass of slave people. We were engineers and carpenters. We built the plantations, we built the roads, we built the universities that still stand to this day. We built the White House. We built so many universities off of, nobody told us how to do these things. We were just naturally engineering things. So that is what I'm saying, we're very special people because we did those things without any, literally the enslavers did not know how to build. It was really us.
So that's so important when you think about epigenetics.
Okay.
So epigenetics is the trauma or the memory that you carry with you through generations. So it's like I carry my dad's trauma, my dad carried his dad's trauma, so on and so forth. And that works both ways. We think about it traumatizing, but it also works in a positive light as well. And just knowing those skills that my grandfather or somebody, put the White House together. Even though they were slaves, that carpentry and that skill,
that masonry,
it's still there.
It never left us.
Yeah, I think that's very important. So what's the first thing that you look up? If you were to what would be the first thing that you looked up as far as just tracing somebody back?
Well, I could start about myself because I feel like I didn't finish it, but so basically I was in the rooms and then I was just thinking to myself wow, am I even eligible? I don't have anything really on my father's information because it was more my father's lineage. When it comes to my mother, who is an immigrant to the country, a lot of her documentation would be at the immigration office. But as far as my father, I didn't have any documentation really over on his side of that family, and so that started to kind of nag at me. So what I did was I got an ancestry account, and then I ended up looking up my grandmother, and lo and behold, I just went into a rabbit hole. I just looked at my grandmother's information, and I went into a rabbit hole and started tracing my own family, and it started from there, and I just became obsessed. I just started looking at all these branches of people in my family, and then I was like, wow, my family is the literal genesis of the textile industry for hundreds of years. So my family has been in the textile industry, because cotton. My grandmother was a sharecropper, and she was picking cotton as a young girl in the year 1900. She was on a 1900 census as an 11-year-old girl. She was a sharecropper, and then I just saw more people in my family doing things that, for example, my grandfather. I found out that he was in metalwork. You know, and I ended up being a welder.
I was gonna
and
say,
so these
you're
are
finding
just,
full circle
these are,
moments in your life. Yeah.
these are not just coincidences. These are inheritances that are passed down as well.
That's very true, because I was telling you that you know, I found out my grandfather was a herbalist.
Yes.
And I find myself kind of following those same tracks on accident.
Yeah.
I had no idea, you know, that I would be into herbalism in any type of way, you know, or form. But it's like I'm talking to my grandma. She was like, "Oh yeah, you know, we used to wear root necklaces, and he used
All
to make
type of stuff,
concoctions,
doing
and
root work.
exactly.
That's really
you know,
what it
like
is.
foraging for medicine and things like
Yes.
that. Like it was.
That's
it's
not
there.
that far
Yeah.
removed from us. Like this is what I tell, you know, my genealogy initiative. It's called Where Your People's From, and it really centers the seniors of our communities, because their families, like their parents and grandparents, a lot of their records are publicly available. So how I am able to start is like I start with I normally start with the seniors in the family, just because there's going to be more information about them than anyone else that's like still alive. So you really have to kind of go older. So that's why Where Your People's From centers the seniors. Because their parents were born, you know, in the 1940s, and those, for example, census records are available. The latest census record that is available is 1950. And so the 1960 census will be publicly available in 2030. You get what I'm saying? So so there's like a method to the madness. And so what I've done ever since was just pull up people's records and just see what's in there. And then I started to learn. You know, what I did was I learned how to read. What am I looking for? What does this, for example, like what does a census form tell me that a birth certificate can't? Or what does a death certificate tell me that, you know, a World War II draft registration card can tell me? You know, you glean different information from different documents. And again, these are just documents, so they're just a small snapshot into your ancestors' lives. It's not a full, complete picture. It's really what I call scratching the surface and just getting you to understand that, or anybody whose genealogy report that I create, it's really understanding that we have a very deep history in the country, and that it's not something that we should just kind of walk away from. It's actually quite significant and interesting and beautiful.
So how far have you been able to trace back?
Oh gosh, I think the longest I've traced someone's family history is to the 1500s in France, to a small town in France. I was able to trace their last name to a small town in 1532.
That's amazing.
Yes, because it's more like when you have white ancestry, you're able, because white people kept these records. So when you have white, so for example, you know, your enslaver, the name of the enslaver that some of us still carry, you know, that traces back to Europe. And these people kept records.
Because they were all under the church.
Yes.
So they've been under the thumb of taxes for as long as they've been alive. For as long as the Moors have been.
And they go and you see that, you know, and also you see that there was a correlation. I mean, you see more that there was a correlation between the expulsion of the Moors and the conquest of the Americas, because the Moors were expelled from Europe in 1492. And they were the ones who guided Christopher Columbus to the land that they already knew was here.
His captains.
His captains were literally like these. The black people on this boat are communicating with the black people that we.
So I'm sure you heard of Mansa Musa.
Yes.
Mansa is actually, it means emperor, and he only became the emperor because his uncle left to America.
Yeah,
Like,
he
the richest man that ever lived only became the richest man that ever lived because
his uncle pieced out, and this was in the 1300s.
Yeah,
and was like, I'm out. Kept y'all on the flip side, and
That's
I know
crazy.
something's beyond the water. And there was. And also, I did some research on the Garifuna people. I don't know if you know about this, but there are indigenous black people of Belize and El Salvador and Guatemala. Well, part of the Garifuna origin story is that we actually descend from the people who came here from Africa on that voyage. They always said that, and this is a group, the Garifuna, where they were never enslaved. They ended up on St. Vincent, and then were kicked off of the island of St. Vincent and made to settle in places like Belize and other places in Central America. However, part of their origin story, because again, they were never enslaved. So things are different when you're not enslaved. You are able to keep tradition. So they still recognize their African ancestry, and they actually say, no, like actually we've been here from that shipwreck. I mean, not the shipwreck, but we are descended from those people who left Africa on that voyage with Abu Bakari II.
Yeah.
That is literally part of their origin story.
That's amazing, because
and they settled in St. Vincent, the island that was, in the Caribbean. But they also trekked up, but also it is my belief that our people were trading with Africa.
Yeah, absolutely.
For a millennia,
Absolutely.
and that
So, okay, that's a lot.
Or here's this, that we have a multi-point origin story. How about that? How about that? How about, let's be honest, that we didn't just come here enslaved. That is something that, is a part of this genocide that we are now experiencing in San Francisco. But again, it's so easy to pick us off when we aren't standing in a history.
Yeah, that's very true. Now, how is art important to all of this, and how does it play a significant role? Because your art led you here to the genealogy, to welding, to textile, like the art played a huge role. So in your opinion, like, how is art important for growth for just our people,
Yeah, I would say so. I think that art is. So I learned this when I was at an arts kind of conference thing, and one of the artists said that art is a safe place to have uncomfortable conversations.
I'm sorry, say that over.
Art is a safe place to have uncomfortable conversations.
That's really good.
And I was like, yeah. And that there is something that is happening here in San Francisco, and it really is important for me for my art to be in service to the people.
Yeah.
Because again, we are, on the decline, and there really is nobody saying these things or aloud. Or ringing the alarm bells. I mean, I'm not gonna say there isn't anybody. I'm just saying that I feel that it is more dire and urgent than people care to admit.
Yeah, that's very true.
And my evidence is like what I see in the community. And I'm running a business like an art gallery where it's meant for people to gather and to come in, and there are times where, I feel like I don't necessarily see, like out on the street, opening the garage door of the gallery, I don't see us reflected in what I see outside.
Yeah.
Or I see less and less.
Yeah, we spoke about that, how the camaraderie and us being together is a part of the overall growth and impact of just how far we can actually excel together. that's very key. Has being here changed your perspective on art in any way after like owning a gallery for some time and having to put together shows? Like,
Yeah, so I would say, sorry, you said, has it changed my
perspective on art in any way?
Yeah, I would say that I think that the way that I'm running a gallery is absolutely my own way. And and that's what it is.
Yeah.
And, you know what I'm saying? I know that it's not meant to, like, here's the thing, like, to me, there's no rules in art.
Yes.
And my art is really not for the white lens anyway. And so it's not like, they're not even a thought here at all.
Yeah.
And so I understand, like, yes, I do things unorthodox or whatever that is. And I just really don't care, really. I think that I have a way that I want to run a space, or I have a way that I envision a space. Lord knows we need more spaces for our community to showcase our art. And a lot of times we just don't even get the chance to do that.
Yeah.
You know, and then we end up stockpiling all this art that we don't have any real places to exhibit it in, if we're being honest. And so this is my version, like the gallery is really my version of building my own table.
Yeah.
Like I'm no longer interested in sitting at anyone's table who does not want me there. I mean, you can apply, like, rejection is a part of art. Absolutely. And it's not the rejection so much, it's the, okay, you are compiling a lot of art and you really have not been able to actualize what you want to do with it, if that makes sense. So how can I, unless I just do it myself? Like, that's really, and I'm not going to wait around for somebody to give me an opportunity anymore, because they're not going to. It's very evident.
I understand what you're saying.
Oh well.
So, if you had any advice for a young artist, male or female, what would it be?
Oh shoots. I think that the advice that I would give to young artists is that there is space and room for all of us to succeed, and that and something that I would say too is, don't build your own arts community. You know what I'm saying? Like, don't look at your art practice as a thing that you tackle as a singular artist.
Yeah.
Really try and create a community of people where you guys can support one another in this process of wherever your art career, wherever you want to take your art career. Build a team, like-minded people, because I tell you, like, doing it, and I would say, specifically if you are, any Black artist specifically, again, I don't even like calling this Black, I just say Black, but really focus on building a team of people or a community of people that really, like what you do and support you, and start building your own kind of events or your own thing, because those types of events are really kind of what being an artist is about. Is like
taking up the space.
Yeah, taking up space, and the more of us that are doing that, the better. That, like, I would not recommend to. I mean, you can go at it alone in an art career. It's just more. It's always better and a lot more fun.
Yeah.
When you're able to do it in a group that really understands it.
For sure.
Yes.
For sure. All right. So, last question.
Yes.
If your art was music, what genre would it be?
Oh my gosh, that's such a good.
I know,
question.
right?
Oh my gosh, I'm looking at it like, oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, I don't even know. That is such a great question. What kind of genre would it be? Oh, I don't know. I don't know. It's definitely, oh man. I don't know. There's something about my art that's always very educational.
Mm-hmm.
Like I want our community to just kind of remember. So I don't know. Like maybe like early hip hop, I guess, like where there was more messaging in the rhymes, like. You know, and things were like kind of more experimental.
Yeah.
I guess.
Okay, I get what you're saying.
Know, like you know, and even when dance was hip hop, dance, used to be.
People forget that break dance is a part of it.
Dance music and house
fashion,
and house
dancing,
music.
all this
that
stuff
was
is hip hop. That
I would say like hip hop house or like
okay.
you know what I'm saying, like the early man. I'm thinking like Queen Latifah.
Yes, like I was gonna say like some type of like that kind of KRS-One era. Yeah, okay. Okay, that's a good one. That's a good one.
Yeah.
All right, yeah, I like that. Yeah, that's a tough question to answer. I was thinking about it myself.
Yeah,
too.
that's a great question.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Oh my goodness.
Get the form. Sparkle like a diamond. Hit the earth like a comet. I can go on for days and days. Get the form. Sparkle like a diamond. Hit the earth like a comet.